Hey, what are you doing?
I'm reading.
Isn't it time for you to shoot your next video?
Yeah, maybe in like one more chapter though.
What are you doing now?
Still reading. See?
But you don't even have a book and you still need to shoot your video.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the little skit scripted part of the video at the beginning that included a voiceover from Matt that I wanted to use to kind of help introduce today's topic, which is focusing on what is reading? Does listening to audiobooks count as reading? Should that count towards your end of the year, how many books I read? Is it okay to consume the same content in different forms? Or is having a physical book the only way you can read? So, first off, I think we can acknowledge that physical books and ebooks, or like digital copies of books, those are both generally accepted as the same thing. You're taking the input in through your eyes and you're reading in the standard form of written language being processed in your brain and you having an understanding of what the language is trying to communicate to you. But in today's day and age, there is another option that's audiobooks, where there's a narrator that does the very important job of reading that content to you. Over the years, as audiobooks have grown in popularity, there has been a lot of research that has gone into what is actually reading and are audiobooks an okay alternative. In today's video, I really just kind of want to break down some of the research that I've done on the topic, my own experience, and I want to dive just the very surface level into what is actually happening in your brain when you are listening to an audiobook versus when you are reading the physical copy. And I'll probably close it out with my opinions as well. So that's going to be our structure today. I'm going to present to you the research that I've done and what the consensus is. I'll tell you my own personal experience of reading a physical book and reading an audiobook. I'll do a very surface level dive of what's happening in your brain, and then I'll tell you my final thoughts and conclusions and my feelings on the matter. And after the video, you can then reflect and think, what do you think counts as reading? Diving right into the research that I've done. In the video description, where I normally put the books that I talk about in the video, I'm going to have the references of the articles that I read and also some of the textbooks I used, because I did go back to some of the college textbooks that I still have that have moved with me in every move, and sometimes I don't know why I have them with me, but they came in handy now. And I'll just make sure that all of those references are down below in case you want to do further reading. For full disclosure, I read the parts of the article that were relevant, or the sections of the books that were relevant to what I was looking at. And I didn't read every article or every book. The cats are playing. Sorry. From the very beginning to the very end. So I wouldn't say that I'm cherry picking my information, but I am letting you know that I only read the sections that were actually relevant to me defining, is there a difference, what the difference is, and are audiobooks considered reading? The first academic article that I looked at was Audiobooks, Print, and Comprehension, What We Know and What We Need to Know. And this, I only was able to look at the abstract for free. I didn't buy any of the articles. I used the free versions online, or in this case, I read the abstract to get the necessary information. This study looked in classrooms of elementary, secondary, and college students where print version of books and audiobooks were both presented as options for students. It then tested those students' comprehension on the documents that they were reading, or in this case, listening to. And overall, especially in younger students, listening to the material increased comprehension. So what does that mean? That means that even though they read the material and they had an understanding, the students that listened to the material had a better understanding. And what does that mean for, does audiobooks count as reading? This, in my opinion, is a point for audiobooks count as reading if the end goal is to retain the information, whether that is for educational purposes or for entertainment purposes. Comprehension is a really big part of that. So if they're comprehending the material better through listening, then I say that it's a check for, yes, audiobooks still count as reading because you are understanding and retaining the information better. The second academic article that I read was audiobooks, legitimate reading, and it did have quotes around reading, material for adolescents. This article, I did have access to the free PDF online, and I did read the sections that were relevant to what I was interested in. I wasn't necessarily interested in specifically the studies that were done on children on audiobooks because I'm interested in, do audiobooks count as reading? So I focused primarily on their introduction and their very well provided overview of what counts as reading. This article notes that audiobooks have been on the rise and that specifically for adults who listen to audiobooks, these individuals are normally avid readers, and audiobooks aren't replacing their reading material, but they are adding in to what they consume, the content they consume as books. In their introduction, they talked about how there have been several studies in the past that have looked at what audiobooks do better and how they can deepen the understanding of a reader. And they do this through multiple ways. When you're listening to an audiobook, you're building your vocabulary as well as you're expanding upon genres. I myself primarily like to read romances because I know I can set it down and pick it up and I know kind of what I'm getting, but I like to listen to fantasies or romanticises. I like hearing that information and storing it better. It also allows you to get content from books that might be above your reading level. These are all things that widen a person's experience. In case you haven't noticed, I keep glancing down. It's because I have a notepad that has all of my notes from the various sources that I've looked into, because there's no way I could remember every single thing that I read. Maybe because I read it the print version. Who knows? But this specific article talks about how audiobooks support all four language systems, which is phonological, semantic, syntax, and pragmatic. If listening to the material still activates and improves all four language systems, again, to me, that's another point in the column that audiobooks count as reading. Another topic that this article touched on were that there are different influences that can affect reading proficiency, and these come from different cognitive, psychological, and ecological systems. The cognitive is this person able to decode and understand what they're reading, what they're listening to? The psychological aspect is, what is the motive? Are there gender influences on what they're reading? Or the ecological one, what does their culture influence them to read? And by being able to listen to audiobooks, as they noticed previously, it expands on the genres that an individual might be used to reading. Finally, This study was, I believe, conducted by 2 PhDs in library sciences, and they've noted that educators in general and librarians all support both print reading and audiobook reading as reading. So if we have a tally going, that's currently 3 points in favor of audiobooks do count as reading. Finally, for this section, I was able to access a book online called Beyond Media Borders, Volume 1, and this had so many chapters. I specifically went to chapter 6 and looked at the paragraphs and the sections within that chapter that applied to audiobooks versus print reading. And in this book, they presented to their audience that in the modern day, if someone is reading, they're normally not distinguishing between I'm reading a physical book or I'm reading an audiobook. So you might be asking yourself, well then Mackenzie, why am I already so far into this video with you talking about what counts as reading? Because though I agree, when we're in our community and we're talking, most people don't differentiate. They encourage people to get book media whatever way works best for them. However, that's not the case for everyone. Maybe you have non-readers in your life, your friends or your family, who will look at you and go, oh, you read so many books last year, but how many did you actually read, or did you just listen to them? And maybe this conversation can help you with those conversations with them about telling them, yes, it does still count as reading. And then you can show them this video of a non-professional. Well, I'd like to think that I'm a professional reader. That was really silly. I'm sorry. But you can show them this video of someone doing the legwork and the initial research of kind of having this information of, yes, experts agree that audiobooks do count as reading. Or maybe you're new to reading and you're wondering yourself, how do people read so much in a year? How does this happen? How do I get there? Do I even want to get there? Or you're just debating, are audiobooks for me? That's where I'm hoping this conversation leads us. This book, in this specific chapter, puts forward that reading is not just the visual decoding of the information presented to you, but it can also be the audio decoding of the information presented to you. If it's still the content is a book, and in the end you are beginning and finishing that content, you have read that book. This book also notes, especially in this chapter, that both visual reading and audio reading can take place with varying degrees of attention and varying degrees of understanding. If all you're doing is sitting and listening to a book, you're going to have a very good understanding. The same way as if you're sitting and just reading the book with no distractions. However, if you are in a crowded room reading a physical book, you're not going to get everything. The same as if you're listening to your audiobook while you're walking to work, you might not miss or you might not get everything. Maybe a dog ran by you and that distracted you for a minute. So they're varying degrees which support that, yes, they're both reading. Finally, the biggest takeaway I had from reading this chapter of the book, Beyond Media Borders, is that listening to audiobooks can actually affect how people experience time. And not in the sense that they're magically transported, but if you have a 30-minute commute to work, and before you started listening to audiobooks, that 30 minutes felt like a really long time because maybe you're just listening to music, or maybe you're listening to traffic or the radio talk show. You're not quite as entertained. But if you put on an audiobook, you're suddenly enchanted by what's going on, and you're in the audiobook world, as well as hopefully still paying attention and driving your car, or walking, or biking, whatever it is that leads you to get to work. It also can take things like daily chores or even weekly chores, and something that wasn't originally fun can be more entertaining because while you're folding your laundry, you're also finding out what happens next in the Hunger Games. Does Katniss win? Who knows? All in all, based off of the 2 articles in that book, I would like to say that we're all in agreement that audiobooks do count as reading. And now we're going to move into my experiences with audiobooks and physical books and where I stand. And I don't think this will be a surprise to anyone, but I'm very much audiobooks count as reading. They count towards my end of year reading goal, the whole kit and caboodle. If I am taking in the content, it's going to count for me. Previously on the channel, I've talked about how I got back into reading around the time the first season of Bridgerton was airing on Netflix because I watched that, found out it was a book, and decided I wanted to read it. But through doing this research and doing some internal reflecting, I've realized that I never really stopped reading. I read throughout college, and when I was in grad school, when I was in the lab all day, I would listen to audiobooks or podcasts, and sometimes those podcasts would still tell stories, and that is how I would help pass my time when I was doing essays or getting materials ready. So I have actually never really stopped reading. Just in the most recent years, I've been able to put more time to reading. I've been able to develop that hobby more, and now I'm reading a lot more. Like anything, reading is a skill, and this hobby and this skill set, the more you do it, the better you are, the faster you are, the more you're going to get done. And I think for me, when I was first getting back into reading physical books, I personally questioned if my audiobooks counted as reading and if that should count towards my end of the year, how many books I read. And for this first several years, it didn't for me because I was just listening to the book. And then, like I said, as I developed this hobby more, I realized that it does count. And I think part of that comes from having friends that are also readers and friends that also listen to audiobooks and growing in this wonderful community that we have. I think there is a question of how fast one reads or how fast one listens to a book, and is the comprehension level still the same? I know in my life, the reason I decided to make this video is I saw a reel, I think, on Instagram of someone talking about how when you're reading, you don't read every single word. Your eyes dart around on the page. It's how our eyes work. It's how visual input goes into our brain, and you'll skip around. But when you're listening to an audiobook, when someone else is reading every word to you, you are getting every single part of the information. You're hearing everything. You're processing all of the information. And it just struck me, it struck me that yes, this does count as reading. And not only does it count as reading, that person was right. When I'm listening to something, my eyes aren't getting excited, or really, I'm not getting excited and jumping further down the page to see what happens and try and hurry up and get there. I have to wait, and I have to hear every single word, even if I'm on 1.5 speed or higher. I don't normally go higher than 1.5 speed, but occasionally I do. So for me, and I feel like for most readers I know, of course it counts. There is the joke that I've heard, and I think a joke that's very popular in the book community, of comparing how many books you read throughout the year and audiobook listeners always have the most because they can just put the speed up and crank out books. That is a possibility, but I think you'll find that when you're starting out, and for the most part, you're listening still at a speed that you can comprehend. And you're still getting entertainment and getting information. And before I get to my final thoughts and conclusions, which probably aren't going to be that much different from the last section, I want to dive in a little bit deeper into what's happening in our brains. How is this physiologically different? And if it's different parts of the brain, how can it be the same? And at this point, I can hear people wondering, Mackenzie, you're just a reader. How can I trust you with this? So I will provide a little bit of credentials. My undergrad degree was in psychology, and my grad school degree is in neuroscience. So today I might not use that every day in my job, and you guys mostly know me as just that random blonde on YouTube who likes to read. But I do know a little bit of what I'm talking about when it comes to what's going on in your brain. And this circles back to me pulling out old college textbooks because I wanted to make sure I was giving you the correct information. And I will have the disclaimer that even though I have studied this and I did some refreshing on this, I'm still a couple years outside of grad school. So, you want to dive in deeper, definitely do more research. Surprise! In this cut, we're suddenly back to a reading recap where I'm holding a book next to my face. This time, it's Neuroscience 5th edition. Such a fun book. Definitely not dry. Also, definitely not a heavy textbook that I'm going to immediately stop holding now that you've seen it. In this textbook, that I briefly read the information that I wanted to read, it talks about how the auditory cortex is less understood than the visual cortex. But I had to check my notes. But though they are distinct, they are definitely related. It also talks about how the auditory and the visual pathways in the brain are laid out similarly and in parallel in an ascending order. This textbook also briefly describes the different lobes that light up, the different areas of your brain that light up through visual and auditory input. And there are similar lobes in similar areas that are activating when you are receiving visual and auditory input. If you're watching this video and listening to it, whoa, your brain is lighting up. If you have muted me because you don't want to hear what I'm saying, but you want to support the channel with some views, and you're actually watching, your brain is still lighting up. Or if you're like me and you listen to BookTube while you're doing other things, and it's primarily a listening device, guess what? Your brain is still lighting up. Different areas in your brain put in a lot of work to get you the information that you need. So let's, before we move on to the last book that doesn't have a lot, I think I only highlighted like a one page in this, but it has good information. Let's briefly touch on what is going on in your brain. And it's so cool. The brain is not well understood yet. It's truly the last great mystery that we have and that we have access to. Not that we should go around just experimenting on people or their brains. Consent is needed, or donations. That sounded weird, but people do donate their bodies to science. Now that we've gotten over that little weird divergence, you're seeing the super nerdy side of Mackenzie. What is going on? So you have an external stimuli, whether that is a noise or visual, and it needs to get inside your brain. You have different organs, i.e., your eyes or your ears, that interpret that stimuli and transmit from images or sounds into wavelengths into your brain, and to get that information from hearing or seeing from the external inside you. It has to travel through neurons and light up different parts of your brain. And it's not as simple as I see something with my eyes, the rods and the cones send the signals, it shoots back through my brain and crosses over, because all of our external input crosses over in some capacity. There is the corpus callosum in your brain, that international highway between left and right side. Everything's talking. I'll continue. Crosses over into your brain and gets interpreted. Just that happens. And then it needs to shoot over. I hope you enjoyed that visual. It's so dumb. It shoots around to other areas of your brain, especially if you're in conversation with someone, you hear what they're saying to you. It goes back and gets processed. And then you need to think about, oh, what are they saying? And then you need to respond to them. So then different areas, but similar areas of your brain light up through language comprehension. And then you have to figure out, what is my response, a response that makes sense to the question they asked me. And then I need to get that out. So then the process kind of reversed. Instead of having external signals get in, you need internal signals to get out. Everything that's going on in my brain right now to get the start of this sentence to wherever the end of the sentence is going, crazy. Especially because I talk with my hands. I'm not even going to sit on them for long because I can't. So in addition to my brain decoding what I need to send out to you, what shapes and sounds my mouth and tongue need to make the sounds that will become words, it's also sending signals to this hand to move in something that for me makes sense to help convey the information, whether that's continuing by saying the word continue, but also the hand motion, or point A to point B. This section has kind of gotten away from me. I miss talking about the brain and talking about neuroscience. But that's not what this channel is about. This channel is about books. So let me get my next textbook for one last little thing, and then we'll conclude the video. Our last textbook and our last source, our last academic source besides me for this video is Biopsychology 9th edition. And the biggest takeaway I had from this textbook was the reminder of Broca and Wernicke, and how through the same areas of the brain, a slight damage can lead to different types of aphasia. So by damaging one part of the brain, maybe you can still understand the external input of either visual or auditory input, but then you can't get that information back out. But the key takeaway is that both written and spoken language will be affected. So if the same brain areas are lighting up, and the same brain areas, if they're damaged, lead to lack of comprehension or the inability to speak that comprehension and confirm it back, then doesn't that mean that however you're getting that information in, either through audition or through reading the visual input, doesn't that both count as reading? Here is a quick video of the diagram in this textbook that got me the most excited, talking about the different types of aphasia and how, if you can see, question heard and words read, they all end up in the same areas of the brain for comprehension. And now we're at the end of the video, and I don't know how it's going to come together in editing, but I really hope that it comes together well and that you guys all enjoy this slight deep dive into a more research type of topic about books. And I hope that if you guys like it, I can do this again in the future and I get more comfortable presenting research in this format. I had such a fun time doing this research and learning more and dusting away the cobwebs of my past as a neuroscientist. And it was a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm just going to leave you with a couple of my final thoughts about audiobook reading versus print reading. And this is it. While I was doing my research, I thought to myself, the very first forms of storytelling were through spoken word. And then, as time went on, print became the primary form of communication, and that is how we as a species shared our stories. And whether those are fiction, biographies, whatever they may be, reading opens you up to new stories and new possibilities. So, with that in mind, I hope we can all agree that audiobook reading not only counts as reading, but might just be us coming full circle. And maybe the next trend will be completely going back to print reading. Who knows? But for now, this is the end of the video. Next week, you guys are getting another bracket video, and it's bracket baddies. So I hope you enjoy and look forward to it. And yeah, I just hope we all have a really wonderful time. I cannot wait to film all of the videos that I have thought up for this channel. So until next Tuesday, I'll see you later.